This is Kreatya Shannon, and today on Virtual Worlds Educast, we will do some insights into virtual worlds and knowledge management. Some of the topics that I plan to cover for today include the knowledge management cycle, the relationship between knowledge management and social media. Then we'll take a look at early research on knowledge management in virtual worlds, why we should care about knowledge management, some common mistakes, as well as some barriers identified in research. There are 6 major phases to the knowledge management cycle. These phases are create, capture, manage, enhance, find, and connect. Most of what we'll talk about today will focus on the capturing, finding, and connecting aspects of this cycle. There are 2 important points to consider for effective knowledge management. One of them is keeping information accurate, timely, and relevant. Otherwise, the perception of an organization can lose its credibility and be perceived as unreliable. This can also create process issues for an organization and, in turn, making it run less efficiently. Now, the other key point is making sure that in knowledge management, users are always able to find what they need. There must be a sense of structure with related topics grouped together and easy to navigate. And people must always be able to find information if they're having difficulty finding what they need, whether it's a frequently asked questions or through a chatbot or other forms of AI. I bring up the latter because it's now a current area of research in knowledge management, and there's also a lot of work being done to figure out how to integrate AI and chatbots into virtual worlds. So I'm presenting that here in context, not necessarily endorsing it if its use is appropriate or not for a specific situation. You have to make sure the information reaches the people who require it when they need it. And you will have the best sense of who you're designing it for and what methods are best for them. There are 2 major impacts that AI has on knowledge management processes, besides the use of chatbots, which I just mentioned. These involve the processing of data to make it more accessible. Data mining can be leveraged to turn raw data into information using machine language algorithms. This detects relationships and patterns in content. Natural language processing can also be run on large amounts of text-based data, as well as audio, to then synthesize information. Of course, it's always important that the output be verified for accuracy and relevancy, as we mentioned earlier. These kind of processes tend to be favored by large corporations or where there's a large backlog of information, in hopes that it will make it more efficient to get the information out there. But the key is to make sure that it stays accurate. If it does, it helps then create information that can be placed into a context using experience and judgment for knowledge management. Many people and organizations use social media as part of their overall outreach. However, they may not have considered how social media can play a role in knowledge management. Let's unpack that together. Social media can track a community's history as a form of knowledge management. However, using it this way only remains strong if an organization approaches social media looking at several elements. These include goals and strategies, consistent evaluation of metrics, and regular interaction with the community. To that end, policies, procedures, and guidelines should be developed to support this venture. Make sure that roles and responsibilities for who handles what if multiple people are involved support regularly making social media a priority. Posting information about activities and events on your social media and then linking that out to a companion blog like we do here at Virtual Worlds Educast, can form the history that makes up part of an organization's knowledge management. This can provide a history over time of how community feedback or ideas that get raised in social media then turn around and affect an organization. However, do not forget, since it isn't something you control, that this cannot be relied on as a sole source of information. You have to capture the data from this in some form that works for your organization in a regular interval and save it somewhere else. But this is a good record of how those ideas originally came about in a community. Now, let's take a step back and look at some early research about virtual worlds and knowledge management. In the year 2010, a qualitative study was done at IBM about using Second Life as a knowledge management platform. Researchers seemed to feel that information could be embedded in relevant areas, but did express concerns. Those concerns were around the areas of security, user interface, and platform stability. Another set of researchers wanted to look at the use of virtual worlds for learning in organizations. They ended up proposing a framework for further study. In their case, they expressed concerns that participants that were learning for organizations would then struggle to bring back anything they learned from those common spaces back to their individual organizations to then be applied. Some research has looked specifically into avatars and their effectiveness in knowledge management. In 2012, a set of researchers looked specifically at this in terms of immersing people in learning knowledge, particularly in education. They conveyed not only a hope for this setup, but also suggested the use of bots to provide information and knowledge when real-world help wasn't available. Now bear in mind, this was research in 2012, well over a decade before this is being recorded. And the author here in the article, they're also talking about doing further research in what was then the alpha version of what we now know as the OpenSimulator grids. And as we regularly talk about here on the Virtual Worlds Educast, the focus is on being an emerging educator in those OpenSimulator grids. So all of this builds on so much. So that gives us a look into the early foundations of where we are now. I have worked in other platforms that are not OpenSimulator to do some various knowledge management projects for nonprofits and NGOs. Right now, I'm trying to figure out how to bring that kind of knowledge management to our offices here in OpenSimulator for the Virtual Worlds Educast offices for folks that might stop in. Now, here in the in-world offices for Virtual Worlds Educast, I'm trying to make decisions of what I would like to do. I could, for example, put interactive books on the bookshelves here that when clicked on would go out to various places on the web that would be relevant or might want other linkable objects around that sit on the shelves that would lead out to here's the YouTube playlist, here's the website, here's how to subscribe to the Substack newsletter, all these different things. And so right now I have to think of the kind of architecture that I want to make that possible. So the key thing is here, as we discussed earlier, there are two qualifications I have to make sure any design that I do meets. The first is if someone walks in here to the Virtual Worlds Educast offices and they don't know a thing about what this is, will I be able to set it up in a structure where they can get what they need to find out about what we do with minimal assistance? Secondly, as we talked about earlier, the onus is on me to find ways to keep it accurate, timely, and relevant, and yet have it set up in a way that requires a minimal amount of in-world maintenance to make sure that it meets those parameters. Now, let's unpack some common challenges and pitfalls that I might run into with this project, or that someone might run into with any implementation for knowledge management. Some major things can create roadblocks. The biggest is having no clear strategy for implementing knowledge management. Another one, lack of organizational commitment or culture within the organization that wants to implement knowledge management. Another big thing to be aware of when you're dealing with a team is communication failure that inhibits the effective passing of knowledge, and that includes the ability to onboard other people into the maintenance of the knowledge management system. And there are other barriers to continued success. The lack of education or understanding about the effectiveness of knowledge management is one. This can lead to knowledge management not fully being integrated into a company's culture, resulting in ineffective onboarding to teach others how to use it, much less maintain it, as I said before. Not enough sponsorship or leadership support is another reason. If there's no methods to see how to improve the process, then it can create a barrier. Inadequate technology or in technology that's not kept up, processes or resources, those can be barriers too, along with budget or cost issues, which sometimes then in turn is the reason for inadequate technology. Again, thank you very much, and I hope to keep bringing you updates step by step as I build the information section in the Virtual Worlds Educast studios and show how knowledge management comes to play for us here. Thank you for being a supporter of the Virtual Worlds Educast.